Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Spotlight. Today we have Jackson Haugh, who I reached out to because he was the president of the Political Science Club, and I met with him, and he was fantastic and great. Jackson, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and what are some of the important things that viewers should know about you?
Hey, I'm Jackson. I'm 20 years old, junior in political science. I really like arguing about politics and philosophy, but that's not probably that fun to listen to. I guess maybe if you're on the podcast, it is.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I mean, awesome, good introduction. I wanted to get to know you and kind of understand your story, and then what brought you here and what your kind of motivations are for doing this. So I guess my first question is, what got you interested in political science, and then furthermore, got you president of the club? What did that interest look like, and where did that start, and how are you here?
Yeah, I think I've had a pretty strong interest in politics for a really long time now, since probably I was 14 or so. But I think it really started to come into fruition during last year, my sophomore year. I started joining a lot of clubs. I think I joined every political club on campus. So that's like 9 clubs. And I was, attending meetings pretty infrequently, but I really enjoyed it. And there was just this call where everyone was like, hey, the entire leadership team of the political science club is stepping down I think they were all graduating. So they're like, yeah, if you want to do it, you can. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I did.
And now you're here.
Yep.
So did you come as a freshman doing political science? Have you switched? Did you switch to political science, or have you always been a political science?
Good question. I transferred here my sophomore year. I went to 2 different colleges before this, but I really like Iowa State, so I'm going to keep it going here.
Good Iowa State plug. That's what the administrators like to hear.
Yeah.
So they caught you and kept you.
Exactly. I was doing political science the whole time, though. I switched a bunch of minors. I was doing econ, advertising, and now philosophy.
Okay. And then what's the dream for you then? So once you graduate, where are you looking to go? Are you looking to go into politics, or some nonprofit, or what are you looking to go into?
I'm really interested in politics. I think it'd be great to work with people making policy. So if that was, being a lawyer writing bills, that'd be really cool. That's why I'm thinking about law school.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's still in the works because you're a sophomore now?
Junior
now. Okay, so you still got a little bit of time to figure figure that out and see where you're going. Okay, I mean, that's super exciting though. The options are open for you.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're ready to start going into whatever political field you want to go into, I mean, that's super exciting. And so then you came here doing political science, and then your goal is to kind of go into law. But I had read that you started working for, was it a homeless shelter, or some sort of shelter, humanitarian thing, or something along those lines? Because you had said you wanted to specifically talk about homelessness, and I'm curious as to what your motivations for that are.
Yeah, I did get a job with the Bridge Home recently, which is a nonprofit that does shelters in Ames, but they're kind of slow at getting me any time right now. They're trying to figure out, I guess, some logistics, but I guess I haven't started working there. I've just gotten hired.
Okay.
For the past 3 weeks.
Hey, no, that's good. That's still enough to brag. But I guess what motivated you? I guess this could get into the homelessness topic in general. But what motivated you to start doing that and start pursuing that?
Yeah, I lived in Vermont, which had a very, very extensive homelessness program. It was probably the most, I don't even know how to describe it, the most extreme homelessness program in the country. So what they were doing was, it's called the motel program or hotel program. You can look it up. Anybody who was unhoused for whatever reason could get a hotel provided for them by the state, no questions asked, for as long as they needed, which turned into a very, very expensive program that ended, I think, a couple months ago. So that really struck my curiosity as to how solutions could be both effective and pragmatic for homelessness. And it really just became I don't know, a creative problem as to what the best solutions would be, as I was noticing some of them failing.
Okay. I mean, that's super interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of that program. I mean, it seems kind of obvious that might cost a lot of money, but it depends on, I guess, what the homelessness population in Vermont was beforehand, and if they thought maybe they could house that, or if maybe people were staying there that weren't necessarily taking advantage of that. But that's did you look more into the specific Vermont thing and figured out what the situation was for that, or is your research kind of unrelated to the Vermont homelessness?
Well, the Vermont Digger does an article about it, which I've read, and so did the Washington Post and the New York Times, I think, because it was a pretty big deal. I think it was over $100 million. I know it was over $100 million. I don't want to say the wrong number, but I think it was $140 million were spent on this program, and this was mainly CARES Act funding. So they had a lot of federal money going into it, and they ended up not being able to continue it as soon as it ran out, which was probably something they should have thought about beforehand. But I think in their heads, they're like, okay, if we just give everyone a house, we've solved homelessness. What ends up happening, though, is after like 2 years of this program going on, they find that this $140 million basically did nothing. Like there were the exact same amount of homelessness people. There was the exact same amount of homeless people, if not more, because people moved from out of state to get into the Vermont homeless program.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about the oversaturation of, I mean, in-state Vermont people who'd come in to use that kind of program. Okay, and so this kind of leads into then, you're doing this research. What are you figuring out? What are kind of your takeaways on, explain to me your proposition or your thoughts on just the homelessness situation in America right now.
Well, people do not like talking about this or having like a conversation about some of the solutions that might be more pragmatic because people really just like the idea of giving money or putting down like building more houses. And a lot of these ideas sound really good, but in practice end up being really, really expensive or really unappealing to like taxpayers, people that are going to be paying for it. So when I thought of solutions, I wanted to take into account like the average person who's living in Vermont. Vermont's a really small state. It's like 700,000 people, which means that their homelessness program should not be costing like that much million.
Yeah.
It was insane.
Okay,
So I thought of a couple of solutions, but I did talk to a group about them at one point and like immediately got shut down. So one of them was, I thought poor farms were a good idea. So that's like an old school idea. And I think they have them in places like England and in Canada. They don't have them anymore because they really just had horrible optics. A lot of these places were really like communist-y. They had gardens and places for homeless people to, create some industry. Sometimes they had workhouses. I think that that's actually not a terrible idea, especially if you're talking about homeless people that want a job but can't find one. Putting them in these places like poor farms, obviously horrible optics, horrible name, but it does have benefits.
I think I need a further explanation. Are you talking about like a sanctuary, like an allocated plot of land that doesn't really have its own economy, that's just kind of designed to house homeless people?
Yeah, I think it's like slightly less than self-sustainable. So there's going to be government-owned property and probably government subsidies going into it. But homeless people can live there and they can work there and stay there probably as long as they need to. And I think it would be a lot cheaper than a motel program. Although getting people to agree to something like that, it requires getting the optics out of the way and talking about how to do that in a way that doesn't make people feel horrible about it.
Yeah.
Because calling it a poor farm, it does not sound good.
Yeah, and it's like, let's herd all these people over to this. I guess what I wonder is like, I guess I need a better explanation of what the current situation that homeless people are living in now, because especially in bigger areas, it seems like there are already communities that are so overwhelmingly like homeless that it kind of already is just, but they don't have government allocated jobs or duties, but it kind of already seems like there's already kind of an ecosystem going on in these areas. So what would stop these areas? I guess I'm not pinning the line to like what would stop these areas from just becoming the same as our homeless populations now.
The poor farms?
Yeah. So it's like, are we paying them to work, or is like the ecosystem of the jobs that they're doing just paying each other in that ecosystem?
I think you're providing them a service in that I don't think you would pay them wages, which is very controversial, but you would give them a house, right, where they could live. You would give them food, and you would try and make it somewhere that they wouldn't be accessible to drugs.
Okay.
So yeah. I think those are like the three main things you need to tackle if you want to get rid of a lot of the chronic homelessness in this country. I would say when you're talking about homelessness, you really need to separate the two types of homelessness, the chronic homeless and the people that are maybe just lost a job, maybe just got out in a divorce, something like that, because there's two very different types of homelessness. One of them I think is connected to job insecurity. People that really just have a lot of trouble holding or keeping a job. Maybe that's because of appearance or drug use or some other kind of situation. Sometimes abuse that can be a problem. And those people oftentimes are chronically homeless, whereas people that just like lose their job and then can get another job in like the next week are not chronically homeless. And when you're addressing homelessness, you can be talking about two very different things in like a very similar way. We like grouping those people together, but people that are like living in their car for a week are in a very different situation than somebody that's been living on the streets for a year and a half.
Yeah, and that's a very good distinction because I think that lumps out a big chunk of my concerned group of this. But I do wonder, what is the end goal? I guess, what is the end goal of homeless people in general? So it's like, if we're giving them a place to live, but they're not making like a salary, are they just expected to live there for the rest of their life? Because if the end goal is just to give them a better version of homelessness, then that would be good. But if I guess the end goal is to get them out of poverty, I don't see how that would solve that if that was the end goal. But if the end goal is just to like make a better homelessness community for people who are chronically homeless, I could see that being a good solution. But I guess I don't see how it helps get us out of poverty, if that's even a possible solution.
I think you're reaching for a really hard problem there, where there are people that are in poverty traps, and you want to help that in any way you can. I think a lot of people say government job programs do that really well, but I think for fixing homelessness, the problem is you're like a step below poverty. You're not even able to afford a home, and that's a real problem that you want to address. And I think you can address poverty afterwards, although I'm sure there's somebody who would totally disagree with me, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then I guess I need to compare this to kind of like other options that other people are throwing out, because it seems like the options that would kind of diversify, or people are always talking about like putting businesses in these areas, like trying to incentivize businesses to go into this area to kind of stir up the economy, get jobs and stuff, or like move people out of the really densely populated locations where there are maybe more affordable homes or things like that. Those are options that I think I've heard more often than something like this. But I think the end goal has always been to erase poverty, which I don't think is like a good goal to go after, just because
Oh, okay.
I feel like capitalism would stop people from, like, would just stop that from existing. Like, there's always going to be a group of people who are at the lowest. You know what I mean? And I guess the low doesn't have to be as low as it is now, but there is always going to be a group of people that are in that area. So I guess it just kind of depends on, I've never heard it talked about in which you keep homelessness like existing. You know what I mean?
I can answer that, by the way. I think homelessness is impossible to get rid of completely. I think it would have to be like literally dragging people out of their out of the streets and putting them into hotels to stop homelessness completely. Because the only other solution is you like have to make sure that people like always have a job. Because when you say a person's homeless, what do you even really mean? A lot of the time people say, well, they're living on the streets. I think it's funny. The motel program, people thought that homeless people would be in motels. They wouldn't be on the streets. In Burlington, if you know much about Burlington, the downtown was always still full of homeless people, and it did lead to high crime. Homeless people are very, very predisposed to crime, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's usually not just because they're homeless. It's because of some other factor. Also, homeless usually doesn't just come from not having a house or access to a house. It usually has other factors to it. I like to try and think of homelessness as like a very umbrella term for a lot of different symptoms that we probably need to address. And I think your housing first approach is a common approach I've seen that doesn't address those symptoms.
Mm-hmm. And so I think it really depends on like what you're doing with this group. First off, I really love this take or this idea because it accepts it. A lot of people, when they're talking about this, it's either all or nothing kind of thing, where it's like, well, this isn't working, so just get rid of it, or we need to do 100% more than what we're doing right now. And this is kind of more like a middle ground of like, okay, let's do something because something is better than nothing.
Yeah.
And let's accept the hard truths that are hard to accept. So I really do appreciate this. I think, and I, because I know so little about the homelessness situation, I guess more like policy wise on how to fix it. I think I understand like homelessness in general, but um, when I hear this, I'm inclined to agree with you. What I'm trying to do though is think of why everyone else doesn't agree with this. And so I think the biggest thing I'm thinking of is long term. And so are there programs that address the homelessness drug addiction problem? Are there programs that address these things? Do they already exist? And then what is the new effectiveness of like making a new area and then implementing these things?
I've gotten a lot of pushback for this, but there are programs like safe needle programs, which technically address drug problems in weird ways. I totally do not think these are good programs. I think optically they are, one, horrible, and two, I don't think you should be trying to solve homelessness or trying to solve drug issues by giving people drugs or
Yeah,
paraphernalia.
by allowing them, yeah, like giving them safe versions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
safe needle programs really, really bother me for just a lot of reasons. But that is one thing people have proposed that's different than what I would say. I think this is like my hottest take, which probably people get really annoyed about.
Okay.
I don't think you should be allowing people that are addicted to drugs into shelters. So if they have drugs on them, I'm pretty sure it's like really hard to tell if somebody's like fully addicted to drugs because some people are good at masking it. But if somebody is holding on to drugs, they should not be allowed in a homeless shelter. That's my opinion.
Okay. And conceptually, I understand how that solves the issue that you're talking about. What I would say though is if you're going to accept that homelessness is an inevitable problem, I feel like drug addiction is also an inevitable problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you'd then be saying is just a majority of homeless people are never going to like get better if you're not I guess if you're not willing to help the people who are drug addicted. You know what I'm saying? Like it seems like there's an inevitable factor about drug addiction that you kind of should be accepting when you're that's kind of like meeting in the middle. That's kind of like saying nothing when they need that help. Or that's my
Yeah, I think
interpretation
that they should be on poor farms and places like maybe asylums. I don't think they should be in shelters. I think shelters should be for like the immediate homelessness, like people that have just lost their job, maybe got kicked out because of an abusive spouse or like have some like problem. They're like fleeing an abusive spouse. These people definitely need the shelters. I think people that are addicted to drugs pose a risk to the shelters, and I think you need a separate program for them. So I would say the poor farms and asylums are the two ones I would like. Asylums got rid of those like years ago. There are still like high security mental health institutions, but the asylum program in the United States that was a thing, and also horrible optics for that because they were like shocking people and giving them lobotomies. I think those programs probably do need to make a return because we have a lot of homeless people with underlying mental health issues that need something more than just a home. So the housing first approach, it literally says, look, the way we're going to solve homelessness is we're just going to give every homeless person a home. But what happens if they like trash the home or like they end up just living on the street anyways because they don't have a job? If these people can't be rehabilitated or be brought back into like functional society, I don't think you're solving homelessness. I think you're solving a second problem, which is they don't have a house. When I'm talking about homelessness, I'm talking about all the underlying issues that cause people not to have houses.
Yeah, and
or not to have places to live.
I think that's a really mature take. What I'm trying to figure out is I feel like I've heard that before, and I personally agree with that just because, like, as a psychology major, you're going to look into, like, solving the root issues of why a person chooses to do the things that they're doing. But I feel like I've heard people say that. Specifically, I feel like I'm hearing, like, the left talk about this and then say, this is the solution. You know what I mean? Like, they have these root systemic issues, things that we have to overcome. The solution is give them more housing. And then when you say optics, I'm wondering, like, what exactly are you talking about when you say, like, horrible? Are you talking about just, like, in and out, money in and out, or, like, success to versus cost?
I just mean it looks bad. The asylum system in the past has, like, a really bad reputation because of the lobotomies and the what do they do? They like gave people like invasive brain surgeries all the time.
I think they shocked people as well. Like it's like shock therapy.
The shock therapy. I mean, there's so much wrong with the old asylum system. I think if you wanted to bring it back on a large scale to where it served a part of the population that actually was just dealing with mental health problems that they couldn't afford to get fixed. I mean, when healthcare is attached to your job, like it is now, a lot of people that are living on the streets just don't have healthcare and they aren't addressing their mental health concerns at all. So they probably need something else. And so if I was to be like the legislator of the United States right now and just make any number of changes, I would probably want to bring back asylums that helped those people before they got into like homeless shelters, because I don't want homeless shelters to feel dangerous. Like when I went to this homeless shelter for my job, every single door had a lock on it. Every single cabinet was like, just kind of sectioned off. They didn't want people going in them. The women's shelter was beneath the homeless shelter, and it had like a 4 like lock combinations that you had to get through to get into like one of the rooms. And they also gave me this like whole spiel about how just like not everyone can be helped. And I think when you're a homeless shelter and you literally say not everyone can be helped, you're admitting that there are people that probably aren't fit for homeless shelters, which means that you need some other system to fit those people. You don't want to just let people be discarded in your society.
Yeah, something more extreme. I guess the next question is more of like on a human standpoint. It's like, what can we do? Like, can we force people to go into these areas? Like, that's kind of the thing of people who think they're living happy lives, or people who are interpreting what they're doing, and then you go in and like, we're gonna move you guys over to this. Like, I guess when you're, or like within something more extreme, no drug addict is like, yeah, I'm gonna go live in an asylum for 4 months and do what feels like torture to get off drugs. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I guess how are you going to tackle that? How would you tackle that issue?
I think to some extent you just can't help those people sometimes. When somebody's really addicted to drugs and they haven't hit their rock bottom and they don't want to go seek help and they want to just stay addicted to drugs, those people probably need to just have some level of accountability to like get themselves fixed before they can do anything. Because I think if you talk to mental health or to experts in drug addiction, they will say oftentimes the first step for rehabilitation is admitting it, accepting that you are addicted to drugs and that you have a problem. And if people can't do that, there's probably not much you can do, even if you're a professional that does this for a living.
And I think some people, when they hear that, they're going to be like, yes, that makes sense, but you can't give up on them. And I think maybe that's where the solution of let's give them a home, like let's do something, like it's to make their situation better. I could see how that's not effective, but it seems I understand why this is like one of your hotter takes, because it seems like inevitably you're leaving a group of people behind.
Right. Yeah, I think I would, if I had to leave one group of people behind for any reason, I would want it to be that they jeopardize another group. So the reason that you wouldn't want drug addicts in your homeless shelters and you'd want them to make the decision on their own is because A, you want people that are willing to change, and B, you don't want them to negatively impact the people that do want to change. So like imagine a scenario where you have a homeless shelter and somebody that's like heavily addicted to drugs and maybe sells drugs because they need to afford their own drugs comes in and starts selling drugs to people that are tenants that probably have histories of drug abuse. I mean, I think it's like 1 in 3 homeless people are currently addicted to drugs or currently have a substance abuse problem. I think that poses like a very immediate risk that I think you just have to try and like do your best to avoid, even if it means leaving that group out. Like it sucks, but those people, if they don't want to help themselves by going to one of the like poor farms, which is what I would say you should probably have, you probably need something else. Like you just can't help those people sometimes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was the answer that I'm looking for, is that they kind of get their own separate allocation of resources and money. I'm understanding, I think now more that it's more like a separation than it is like leaving them out, which I think is important. I also think though that if you're cutting off people who are drug addicted or have drugs from these homeless shelters, I feel like that would also motivate people a little bit more to like get off drugs as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get to go to this shelter if I am clean for this amount of time or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think you'd still run into that issue of people who are kind of masking it better than others, or people who are bringing it in without you knowing, or things like that. So, but I don't think that should constitute getting rid of the entire idea just because some people can break through it. But I do think it's worth mentioning if it's bad. The hard part about this though is you'd have to have such a level of confidence in this, because you create a much greater risk by excluding a group to save another. If you say like it's going to help this group better, then it's going to hurt this other group. Like you are incurring a great risk, and I think people are uncomfortable with risking that, especially like politically when they're making decisions and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
I think it's a risk for sure.
Yeah, but I guess that's the point. It just
It's my hot take. I think
yeah.
I still think you probably don't want these people in places like I would consider homeless shelters if I could have the perfect way that they would be drug havens, drug-free havens. So there's no drugs on the premises. Um, I think people that are escaping drug abuse really can't be around any kind of temptation because it's a major, um, I mean, it's just a major problem. Like people with drug abuse problems can't keep themselves away from it sometimes. And if you're trying to not use drugs and somebody has drugs around you, that's really tough. That's like a mentally tough thing to deal with.
So I guess what my next question is what about this like recirculation of people? So like you go to a homeless shelter, you're free of drugs. After that, where are you going? You know what I mean? Because those people are still like homeless. They're leaving the shelter, and if they go back to wherever they're living, the chances of them being surrounded by those people increase. So I feel like there should also be a program that happens after the shelter as well.
I think the immediate homeless people, so people that would be using the shelters in this situation, people that have like just like recently lost their job or had some, I don't know, divorce, something like that. Uh, there are people that suffer from homelessness like very intermittently or like once when they don't like make a payment or they like have some problem that they're trying to fix. But those people tend to bounce back a lot better than people that have chronic homeless problems. So those are usually due to mental illnesses or drug abuse. So those people I think are actually better off than most the people that would be using the shelters. I do agree there probably needs to be some kind of program to help them, but what that is sort of open to me. I'm not really concerned about it. I think it could be like any number of things. You could probably just say expand welfare,
Yeah.
add a new like jobs bill, something like that. Probably work
Yeah.
for them
What do you think your most powerful criticism against these ideas are?
against people that are housing first.
Yeah. No, against like your position, what do you think? If you were to steel man like the position against you, what do you think it would be
Okay.
the best?
Um, I think you could say that it doesn't fix it, and I think you'd have to like explain that a little better. But you'd probably say that poor farms in the past have never worked, and that uh, the asylums in the past were not like great at keeping people, I don't know, sane. But I don't know, like
Have you looked into past statistics of these things and like looked on an objective front, like the numbers in and out, or are bad numbers chalked up to just done wrong?
I honestly don't know how bad asylums were. I know people criticized them a lot, especially for their practices, and there's like a lot of movies about it in pop culture.
Yeah.
But I think the idea still stands, and in states where they don't have asylums now, they're paying a lot per person to administer any care. I think in Vermont they have a hospital with like 10 patients that cost like over $1 million in one year. It was well over $1 million. I don't remember where in Vermont, but this kind of thing makes me think that we need a more expansive healthcare for people that are like probably mentally unfit for society.
Yeah. Okay. And so then I guess the next question would be who's paying for this? How much does it cost? And um, where's this money coming from that does these things?
I think this is ultimately going to be like way cheaper and probably a lot more effective than most homeless programs that exist. So the homeless program that I know about in Ames, the way it works is they give you housing kind of immediately, and then they try and move you along like a track, which gives you like first some immediate housing, then maybe you get an apartment that's subsidized. Sometimes all like the rent is free in one of their apartment buildings, and then maybe they try and move you onto another apartment with like a little less subsidizing by the homeless shelter. I think that these programs are sometimes effective, but sometimes not. at eliminating homelessness or like trying to get people on their feet. They were saying to me that it took like some people or a lot of people a year or more to get on their feet, which sounds like a really long time. And it sounds like they're expending a lot of resources because they're building, like $10 million apartment complexes to do this, which cost a lot of money. It's not necessarily all taxpayers, but it's grants and people are like doing it. So nonprofits are doing a good job, but there's got to be a better solution, in my opinion, that costs less and is more effective.
Well, it also feels like the solution to this varies heavily depending on where you're going. Like the homelessness issue in Ames, Iowa seems so wildly different than it would be in like New York City.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like the cost, the space, the cost of living, where you can go physically. I feel like these are all things that like vary state to state. Like I'd imagine that a poor farm would work much worse in a less populated place than I feel like it would be in like a more populated place. Do you think that's an accurate thing to think about, or?
No, I think you're dead on, actually. And when I talk about homelessness, I guess I'm sort of addressing the problem as a whole, where homelessness is really a bigger factor in big cities and places that are more densely populated. Places like Iowa, Minnesota, a lot of the Midwest and like, I don't know, prairie states do really well with homelessness or are considered really good at homelessness. There was like a poll that like listed states. I think Iowa might have actually been number one in terms of like best at dealing with the problem. And I think it's because we kind of do deal with like a different style of homelessness here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little easier to deal with versus some places like, I don't know if you've been to the West at all, California,
Yeah,
Portland.
I've heard, but I haven't been.
There are some very wild homeless problems there where it just feels like there's almost like a lawlessness to homelessness that makes it like a danger to the people there. And it's giving people like a lot of like fear versus here where I think people really just want to like help people.
What would have to happen, or what do you think you would have to experience to change your mind on this? Like what would have to be true in the world for you to change your mind on this?
Well, I think I'd see if I'd seen something work really well in like Vermont's homelessness program, or if I'd see like another program that works better. I'm very open. This is like my idea right now.
Yeah.
If I had to like formulate like a full plan to like get rid of homelessness or like help homelessness the most I could, these are like my main ideas, but I'd be really open to different ideas if I saw them working. The problem I think with that is that a lot of places aren't implementing like almost anything other than just like, oh, we're going to fund these hotels and motels. We're going to do some like public housing units. Like there's just like not a lot of creativity in the homelessness problem.
Yeah, these people are lame.
Yeah, they don't think outside the box. Literally.
Yeah, outside the apartment box. Yeah. Well, I mean, I asked that question because it kind of weeds out the integrity of what your purpose is, and I think it reveals a genuine purpose, and that really your end goal is just to solve the homelessness problem, or like to at least help it. You know what I mean? And I think that's really important. I think if I asked other people who are maybe more politically inclined to answer a specific way, I feel like they would not have answered that way. They would have said like, there's no way. You know what I mean? Like
homelessness is such like a meta political topic because people really just love to like not talk about it, but like bring it up. They'll be like, oh, if we just didn't go to war with Ukraine, we could have solved homelessness. Or like, they're like, what do they say? There's like some really good things we could be doing with this money. If we just tax the rich, we could get homeless people like completely free. It's like, you guys just don't want to engage.
It's just a bargaining chip. It's just a bargaining chip. Because both sides use it and deny it in different ways at different times.
And then they don't do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And then no matter what, it doesn't get solved.
Or they do spend like $100 million on homelessness and it accomplishes nothing.
Yeah.
Like they net more homeless people. It's like, this is not a money problem. This is a thought problem. You guys aren't thinking about this problem the right way.
Well, and that's what I was thinking too, because initially there are some issues, especially money-driven issues, that I feel like the main issue is that people aren't willing to me anywhere resembling the middle on it. It's either all money is bad money towards this, or there's no such thing as enough money towards this. And no people are willing to just like, okay, any money is a solution. It's this and climate change, I think, are my two, like, that have this kind of vibe that are like, theoretically, any money would be good money. But like you saying, let's spend $4 trillion on climate change, and then me saying no isn't me saying let's spend zero. You know what I mean? Like it's so wildly different. And I think these are the two topics. I do think there are other topics though that don't have as much leeway, that are like the people who are contemplating it on either side. It's either all or nothing. And I think those are generally abortion. I think those are the LGBTQ conversation. And I think probably anything within like Black rights or like the Black Lives Matter. I think those three are probably more like yes or no. There's not really like enough. There's not money you can throw at the situation or talk about. It's more of like literally this is philosophically like what is happening and what you think and why it's good or not. And I saw you light up when I mentioned abortion.
Yeah.
I will say, since you and I met up, I've had a total reworking of my opinion on abortion.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. I'm a whole new man. First off, I do want to get this out of the way. Where would you say that you lean politically? And then do you think that it's important to be able to assess that? Or do you think that the labels of that are just like ineffective and don't really mean anything?
Do you mean like Democrat, Republican, or like liberal, conservative?
I'd say probably the more important. I maybe not the more important, but I normally go by left and right, which would be conservative, liberal is normally how I do it.
Yeah, I'd probably go a little more liberal. But there's some good conservative ideas.
Okay. Yeah, and then how do you feel about just like adopting an ideology or like sticking straight to like one kind of way of thought?
I don't know.
That's okay. I guess I asked that because some people, their opinions are what their side should think, as opposed to what they genuinely think. And some people are kind of scared to have a mix of both ideas because of that. And so I kind of asked that just to kind of gauge like where people are. And plus, I always love talking about that. But let's talk about abortion, because I have a ton of new thoughts about it that I want.
Yeah, why don't you
I want
go
to
ahead
run
and
through the meat grinder.
hit me with your new thoughts.
Okay, so my new thought is, and this is literally copy paste from Destiny. If you know who he is, he's like a online gamer, like political commentator. But this is literally Destiny's opinion, which is that, well, okay, first off, I should specify that the main conversation that I think covers like 95% of the argument is, when does life begin? Everything else is kind of superficial and will be solved when you answer that question. So this idea of like women's rights, this idea of, I mean, that's basically it, but, or healthcare, all these things are kind of unrelated if not you are killing a person. Would you kind of agree with that? That most of it relies on whether or not it's murder is pretty much the question that we're answering.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then in general, I had heard what I did is I'd heard the rights argument, the pro-life argument, and it had never been said against somebody who is willing to not willing to give the other side some leeway. Mm-hmm. So like some people are like no to everything because they're not ready to defend the main position. And so they just say no to everything. And so it's a really bad way of arguing. But this is the first time that I've heard a pro-choice argument that was like, no, I don't care about that. Like, no, I don't care about that. This is it. And it makes me seem like a horrible person, but this is it. And so the general philosophy that I'm adopting is that life begins at the capacity for consciousness, which scientifically has been defined as around, and this is, I've not researched this, but if whatever that number is, that weak number when you develop the organs to develop consciousness, I've heard that it is around 20 weeks. So then I would say at the lowest end of whenever they think that happens, which would be about 20 weeks. And I'd say anything before that is fine. Anything after that is not.
Which debates did you watch, if I may ask?
A lot. I've watched a lot. I watched his 2 on the Whatever podcast, and then I watched 2 more. I don't know about the people. One of the guys had a beard. I don't know his name. I've watched, I'd say probably 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
and then the whatever ones, well, one of them with the two women, he didn't get a single point across. I would not say that was a fully formation of his argument in any way at all. But the other one I watched was just him and one guy on the whatever podcast, I believe is a philosopher. That one he got to a pretty good chunk of his logical argument there. So that's generally what I'm leaning towards right now is that 20-week mark.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I
Oh,
actually,
yeah. Well, wonderful.
that's probably about where I'm at. I have seen Destiny's debates. He's really good at debating abortion. And I think that his opinion about consciousness is really good. Well, it's like really solid. I think the place that I like moved on to after like watching a bunch of these debates, I think I've seen like 10 of his debates on abortion.
Yeah.
I think that the problem with consciousness and the problem with all moral arguments about abortion is that they ultimately can't know for sure anything. So when you ask somebody when consciousness begins, like exactly, they're literally never going to be able to say. And they're going to be pretty hard pressed to define what that consciousness looks like. A lot of the time they'll say, well, you've got the frontal lobe, so you're able to do higher order thinking. You're probably able to do some sensory reception, blah, blah, blah. I think that is an incomplete argument as to what personhood is. But when somebody says DNA is what makes you a person, that is like the most incomplete answer to what personhood is. So winning that moral argument or not losing that moral argument, because people are just going to argue against each other forever on that one, is fine. But ultimately, it's like impossible to decide. And it's like a philosophically like open-ended question as to when personhood begins.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it, because I don't think I have any animosity towards pro-life. And what I would even argue is that if you are anti-killing of any sort, so you're anti-war, you're anti death penalty, you're anti like self-defense, like you'd rather die than take a life, some sort of like sainthood, then I think you're fine in believing in a pro-life position, because like if it really isn't just like a personhood that you're taking away and it's straight up just a human life, then I think you're fine to defend pro-life. I think that'd be more of a religious standpoint. If your religion was that you can't take a human life for any reason, I don't think that's a good reason to believe what you believe, but I wouldn't necessarily fault the person for believing that. That would be generally my opinion. I also think when I said like it covers 95% of the argument, I've also been like trying to figure out my thought structure on accountability just in general, of like when you have sexual intercourse, the end result is going to be a baby. So is it morally like, are you actually taking, and of course like getting an abortion is probably a very difficult thing to do, but what I wonder is there an accountability there that you should adhere to? Because for me, if me and my girlfriend got pregnant now, I don't think I'd get an abortion, even if it were wildly inconvenient to me at any time. You know what I mean? So I just wonder if there's an accountability piece to this that should be talked about.
Well, it's a good thing you're not your girlfriend, because you don't have to get an abortion.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. And yeah, I think I just wonder, it's like when you're making a decision and the future consequence of that decision is something that you are very aware of when you're doing it. Is there a moral, a moral rule that you should adhere to that consequence?
No.
Okay. It's like, I can't remember what the philosophical idea. I think there's something. Yeah, I don't know. I think, like I said, I haven't really worked that one out, but there is something that makes me just uncomfortable about that generally. Just like, but at the same time, the argument is solid for the 20-week mark, at least for me, and so I don't really think about it too much. And what I have discovered is that. And I was telling you this as to what my hot take was when we met, was that like there's kind of a dishonesty in the pro-life argument in that, and that was even when I had considered myself like full pro-life, was that when people are talking about it, like you can just use intuition and distinguish the difference between a 0-week-old fetus and a 40-week-old fetus or anywhere in between. Like you can just intuition distinguishes those for you. And I know that doesn't mean a basis, but that should apply some pressure on like what your actual argument is.
Yeah.
Like you should just be able to know what a difference what the difference is.
I mean, those are definitely intuition arguments. You look at a picture of a 1-week-old fetus and it looks like a chicken egg, and then you look at a picture of a like 40-week-old fetus and it looks like basically a baby.
Yeah.
I don't think it's super relevant, although I also would agree that the 20-week mark is probably where I feel comfortable leaving that off.
Yeah.
I think that what's missing in a lot of these discussions is there's like a very bad dishonesty on the pro-life side. Because if you ever ask them why they think personhood begins at conception, the answer they try and give you all the time is they try and make a scientific argument, which is usually DNA. Or they come up with some potentiality argument. That's the potential for it to become a person. And I know you've probably seen this in the Destiny debates. He always disputes that because he just says, well, potential isn't the person.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what you're protecting. It's the potential. So why are you protecting the potential? And like the good example is you don't like say, hey, look at my building when you have a bunch of like sticks and bricks and like tools lying around.
Yeah.
You say, look at my building when you have a building. And people will make the other example, which is kind of counterintuitive. You put all your ingredients together and you have a cake, and it's like, oh, well, you knocked over my cake. It's like, yeah, because you haven't put it in the oven yet. It's not a cake, right? Well, I mean, when you're talking about a person, like in those those first stages, there's literally nothing worth protecting. I think the consciousness not being there is ultimately so it like invalidates the thing so much. And I think that pro-life people are very, very squirrely about that. They don't want to admit that consciousness is the thing worth protecting. They do it all the time. I got into a debate with a guy outside the library, like
that's always where it happens, bro.
A week ago, and I was asking him, so like, when did somebody die? Because this is kind of an important part of the debate. Like, when do you think somebody dies? And they're like, oh, well, when their heart stops. I'm like, do you really think that? Like, it's when their heart stops. And I guess the best way to counter that is like, if you gave somebody a mechanical heart, has that killed the person because it's not their heart? Their old hearts just stopped.
Yeah.
And then the obvious answer to that is, well, no, they haven't died. Their heart is beating because it's now their heart in their body. But then you ask them, okay, but let's say I switch their brain out with somebody else's. Is that the same person? Like if that brain just like dies on the floor and then that new brain like wakes up and it's like, oh, hey, I'm Steve. Wait, no, I'm not. Like, look at my face. Like that's definitely the person just died when the brain dies.
Yeah.
So consciousness and brain activity usually is the better example of birth and death, I think. And I haven't really hit a more compelling answer to that.
Yeah, well, I think for the people listening, I could just sense like the people listening, and we skipped a lot of steps
Yes.
just in having this conversation because I think we just agreed. What I think though is what I think the groundwork that I would like to lay out is that the pro-choice side pisses me off so bad because that's also dishonest in that like the people who are like, it's my body, my choice, that would seem so unrelated to what pro-life is saying. You know what I mean? Like, just like, do you like kind of get what I'm talking about? As in like, you're acting as if the answer has already been found in the conversation, although it hasn't. That's why we're having it. And so when people are like, it's a woman's right to choose, like, it is a woman's right to choose if it isn't murder. That's what the whole conversation is about. And so like that whole movement is super cringe and annoying. And like the whole, and I guess it's the same thing for the people who are talking about like, no, you can get an abortion at 8 months, like whatever. You know, there are people who are like, at any point you can get one. Like that's a whole other thing too, where it's like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, could you get it at one day before you are like have the baby? You know what I mean? And some people are agreeing like yes to that. Most people are like, okay, no, that's like uncomfortable. And then that's when you bring them down the line. But most people's initial argument is like, at any point you can do it. And that seems also super dishonest as well. And so like, there's this weird, somehow there is kind of a middle ground at 20 weeks, but no side wants to admit it because they're too deep in the hole of like defending what their initial side was.
Yeah, I think Roe v. Wade, the decision to make it 20 weeks before you could start writing legislation against abortion I think that's a pretty smart place to put it. I don't know if it's super well argued in the case, but the 20-week line happens to just be about like the convergence of a bunch of different opinions about abortion. A lot of people say, oh, you can't do it before they have pain. Well, guess when pain starts? It's like 20 weeks. It's like 18 to 24 weeks is usually like the time frame. So the um, the opinions of like when an abortion is like okay to get or like what point it's not okay to get, usually they actually coincide. Like even when you have a bunch of different reasonings, and that can lead to more harmony than just saying, oh, well, we're going to do 6 weeks because that's when a heartbeat starts. No other reason. We just don't care.
Yeah, yeah, like it would just closing your eyes and choosing a random point.
I mean, 6 weeks is really because they don't want you to get an abortion. And there's really no way of knowing that you're going to have a kid like by 6 weeks. I mean, most people don't.
Yeah, I also think there's a lot of applied maliciousness in this argument in that, like, because I think that, like, if I was a pro-life person, because I think that life starts here, that I'm inherently an evil person because I want to control you, or vice versa, because I think life starts at, 80 weeks or whatever, or 40 weeks or whatever. Like, that's when life starts. I'm also an evil person because I'm killing people. I think that, like, intuition is also incredibly bad for the conversation.
There's a lot of stuff like that. I mean, people will say like worst case scenarios all the time. Like, oh, if you're wrong, what's wrong? Like, what happens if you're wrong? Well, then there's like a genocide of babies every single year. Like 500,000 babies die a year.
Yeah.
It's like, but if I'm wrong, then I guess we just had a couple women like give birth to somebody that nobody did. Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? You know?
Yeah, I think, dude, that debate with him and on the whatever podcast with the two women is unwatchable. That was the convergence for me. Was like seeing like the pro-life side argued so badly. Is when I was like, wait a minute, am I like on the wrong end of the stick here? Like I'd always been like pretty lenient. I'd always been like, here's logically pro-life is right, but morally there's intuition that makes pro-choice right. Like that's always where I've been. It's like the logical argument I haven't heard a good counter to, so I'm more pro-life, but like the pro-choice side, there's obviously a difference between a certain baby and I'd say like once they can start, feeling pain or start feeling emotions and stuff, that's probably when you shouldn't kill it. And that's always how I've been. But this definitely like converted me of okay, like here's my line, is right here.
Well, people get really, really morally attached to these arguments. I think one thing that brings people onto the pro-life side all the time is the argument that you're going to like stop people from having disabled children, like the Gattaca argument, basically. And people really like get like upset when they think about like how, oh, people with they're like babies with Down syndrome are gonna like be aborted at a much higher rate, or African American babies are gonna be aborted at a much higher rate. It like gets into this like kind of eugenics-y argument, which I actually do just think is like pretty much a red herring, because if you don't think it's a person, you shouldn't care whether or not the non-person has Down syndrome, but people really do get attached to those arguments.
Yeah.
They think like, well, look, Sweden has no people with Down syndrome because they've made it so that they don't have to worry about like getting abortions. And it's like, yeah, but those like babies that were aborted weren't people. Like saying baby is just another intuition pump. It's really hard to get that across to people when your opinion is that they're not people, because they will say, well, look, they have these like underlying conditions and then they're killing them because of that. It's like, I don't think that that's a compelling argument as much as it is just an emotional argument.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. I think you and me talk about this, and a lot of people might listen to this, and not a lot of people are going to listen to this, but people might listen to this, and their instinct is like, okay, two white dudes talk about abortion. And that also is just such a bad, like, because you should be able, you should, yeah.
I don't know about you.
Hey, ladies, I'm pro-choice.
From what you've been saying, it sounds like you might be like on the fence. Like,
I think I'd say I'm pro-choice, but I think I have empathy for the pro-life more so than pro-choice people would say. But the issue is what I'm getting is that people will hear this and they're like, okay, of course, two white dudes can have a conversation about abortion that doesn't get like heated and emotional because like they don't understand, but at the same time, one of the things that I think with talking about politics is a lot of these issues have been applied so heavily to their personhood And so if they're wrong about it, they have to fundamentally change a multitude of things about themselves. And abortion is one of those things. So like, especially on people who are using like religion as their basis for why they're pro-life, they have to change a lot of things about themselves if you're going to make them give leeway on the pro-life argument. And so I think having some humanity to that, and that's one of my major disagreements with Destiny, is lacking that humanity. Not that it's not the coolest thing ever, and it makes for the most satisfying thing to listen to. Just to get like, let's get the most robotic, unemotional like view of anything.
Yeah, what does he say about like eating the like 12-week-old fetus or something? Roast it up on his. He's like saying roast on his spit.
It's like things like that where it's like, yes, it's cool, but that's not accurate to humanity. Like, you're almost so desensitized to it that you're not making an actual solution, because you couldn't get 99% of people to fully agree with you on this because you're lacking humanity on it. So there does become this issue of like, is your opinion really right if it can't actually like do something? And I think one of the biggest things you're going to have to tackle when you're talking about abortion is like, how do we override the emotional barriers that come when talking about this, so that you and me can actually have a discussion about this?
Well, look, I'm not against cannibalism. I should just let you know right away.
Seriously?
Why
not
not?
when they're alive, or when they're
not
dead.
when they're alive.
Yeah, I've actually heard that isn't illegal.
Soylent Green?
No, that eating another person isn't illegal.
Wow.
Like if you were to walk down the street, this is logic or facts that I heard in 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So take with a grain of salt. But I'd heard that if you walk down the street and you just see a leg on the ground, like a human leg,
Mm-hmm.
you can eat that. And
But like you wouldn't actually know it was a human leg. You could have just thought.
Yeah, yeah. I
Somebody
just
left
thought it
out
was
a
a turkey
tasty
leg.
treat.
Yeah, a candy flavored human leg.
That would be a really like shitty way to find out you were addicted to meat. Like human meat.
Is if you just ate something thinking that it was.
Yeah, you're like eating a leg. You're like, this is like a delicious turkey leg. Then you look at the bottom of it and there's a shoe, and you're like,
You're like, dang it.
why does this always happen to me?
I say now you're a black market like cannibalistic searcher.
You're like, guys, I got the taste, and now I can't get it out of my mouth. Like,
Yeah, I think there's a there's a moral argument with cannibalism of like what you're doing to other people when you like alive people, and so it's just like kind of a mean thing
well,
to do.
I'm not okay with it when they're alive.
yeah. Well, no, I mean like the family. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh.
like people who are currently alive. It's like, that's why I say it's like a mean thing to do. Like it's like a thing that you shouldn't do, but like not in the conventional sense of it's immoral. Kind of like you're being a jerk.
kind of like a Cartman's chili situation.
Yeah, cutting up his family. yeah, one of those. Everyone's in one of those situations.
Right. I think, I think you're right. If the family did not want you to eat them, then you probably shouldn't. Like, you should respect those wishes, because don't you become like the heir of your like body if you
if you
die.
consume somebody, or yeah. So like what
the
they
family
feel.
the family becomes the heir of the body. They get to choose what to do with it.
That's true. Yeah. So if they choose that it should not be eaten,
If they're like in the will, like, do not eat.
I guess if you put that decision up, do you think people are like, yeah, you can go ahead and eat my son? Like, do you think people are like would be chill with that?
Well, here's the
I guess
thing.
there are organ donors.
There's a school of thought here, which is like you could be like keeping a cannibal off the streets.
Yeah, and this was another to bring it back. Sorry, not to jump from the cannibal thing. I think that reached its logical conclusion.
Oh, go ahead.
But
yeah.
there was this Destiny thing about and I've never said anything even remotely close to this on this podcast, but there is this Destiny topic about child pornography, and it was a more logistic approach.
Oh God, yeah, I know this.
Yeah, and so here's like the argument goes something along the lines of, if it gets more people who are creating it off the street, then he would consider like having it be a thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't even consider it. The thing is, like, so, God, there's so many reasons not to even consider it. Mainly, you just don't want to cause like the person who's in those tapes harm. Like, that's number one. I think the second reason is that you you just don't want to be like giving people tools or like having those tools on hand. So when I think about the used needles program, maybe it's making drug use more safe for people that were like going to do drugs anyways. I don't want the government giving those tools out anyways. Like no matter what,
Yeah, like it's kind of the same thing.
there's a chance they're aiding in drug use. It's just not good. I think ideally the government cracks down in a different way because the goal is to like stop people from using drugs, stop people from being pedophiles. Like, yeah.
Well, and I think the conversation started from this like one researcher who was like, there's a chance that this actually like we could use it as a rehabilitation program and that there's a chance. And beyond all of them, because I think that was Destiny's final thing was like there are ethical issues with the victims of this and like asking them to use it and like the chances of saying yes are like near zero. I think the more interesting one was like, what if we could get AI to create child pornography and then use that as rehabilitation for people. And I think it should be stated that pedophilia is probably one of the worst things.
Well,
on the
who's
planet.
gonna like make sure that it's not like bad? Like, who's gonna be the one that has to test the
Has
AI?
to watch it? It's
They're like, all right, let's make sure this AI is working.
oh, the worst job on the planet. It's,
Well, they could give it to a pedophile. They have the best job on the planet.
I said they could have one of the that's part of the rehabilitation program is you actually have to vent it for that's the
Yeah.
final test is you have to watch it at the end and see what happens and then you got to pass it on to the next people before you. It's just those unfortunate few at the beginning who have to who have to do that. I can't believe I just said all that on camera. I think it should be specified that this is all a pure logistic conversation.
Yeah, this
and,
is an educational conversation.
this is an educational conversation. Well, because I think my biggest thing is if it's something that makes you uncomfortable to talk about, you should probably talk about it. Like I don't think that I'm a big like not censorship kind of person in that like I don't see the use in not talking about things that make people uncomfortable. Obviously, there's a line to be drawn that are the current legal standards of like threatening and whatnot. But I do think that there shouldn't be a lot of things that you just can't talk about. That I think that's a bad sign for conversation and for schools of thought.
Yeah, it's really bad in academia too. If people are like, well, we probably shouldn't talk about this.
Yeah. Like there are some instances where I understand it to where it's like it's in bad faith because you're talking about another person and like they may be like running someone's name through the mud. Like if I were to say a specific teacher did this to me and I were to like name drop them, you know what I mean? But I think when it comes to conceptual conversations, I feel like if you can't talk about it, like that should raise some alarms for you in like what your topics of conversation was. I guess talking about the child porn is always going to be uncomfortable. I don't think I actually, if you were comfortable doing that, that should say something bad about you. But
I was uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah, guys, I promise I was uncomfortable talking about that. Like the footage goes back, and I'm like not even breaking a sweat. I'm just like casually talking about it. But in general, I'm of that view.
I have a question for you then.
Go ahead.
So you talked about not being able to talk about stuff. How do you feel about teachers not being able to talk about LGBTQ in schools?
Yeah, I think I'd go for a more practical approach on this as well. Like it would depend on what the results were. And the problem with that is it kind of goes down this long chain of command of like if being LGBTQ increases the rates of suicide and depression because of that, not other factors.
Well, see, when I went to high school and took gay class, I actually turned out straight.
Yeah,
So
crazy,
yeah,
crazy.
So
crazy
they were trying.
Yeah,
But it turns out it doesn't actually even work on
I would
me.
say I had gay class first period and it was crazy.
Really?
Yeah, it's first and last period.
What happened in gay class?
They tried to get me, but they tried to get me to watch child porn, but I just couldn't do it.
Gay class?
Okay,
Are you trying to hint at something?
We're done with the child porn. But I just imagine my stepmom listening to this and she's like, what the hell is going on? No. Okay. So if the extension is that more LGBT, more gay people, whatever. No, gay and lesbian is a whole different thing than trans. If more trans people are committing suicide and have higher rates of depression exclusively because they are trans, and then teaching about it in school increases the amount of trans people, that would be a bad thing. If neither of those things are true, I would consider it more likely. What I find uncomfortable in general is, I guess, the logical conclusion is you probably shouldn't be talking. You should be talking about what promotes the most happiness, what promotes the best society, and what promotes the best in a person. And so if being trans doesn't do that, then don't do it. If
All
it
right,
does,
cool.
then
We're never talking about genocide again.
yeah.
Perfect.
Well, well, no, because talking about genocide promotes teaches. It's the same way of history of like
Not for those kids that are like, oh, that's a good idea.
what. Well, it probably in a scale, it probably causes more people to not commit genocide than do.
You
commit
think
genocide.
people are like, just like, oh, good thing I didn't read Hitler class because I just now I feel like shit, now I feel like I don't have to feel guilty about this.
like people are getting justified because they learned about it in history.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. I think the general population, because of how horribly it's talked about, like this is a bad thing. People aren't doing it because of that. And even if one person tried to commit genocide, I think it would still be a net positive by the amount of people that didn't commit genocide.
Even if one
Don't
person
clip
did.
half of that sentence.
It's going on my YouTube channel, actually.
Yeah, Elijah clips. So in general, with it being taught in school, I think it makes me uncomfortable because some people make it about sex completely, even though that's not what the majority of people are doing. So it's kind of like bad apples
I feel like the majority of people are doing sex.
are
Sorry.
are putting it in the respect of just sex, of when they're talking about transgenderism and like the LGBTQ community.
Wait, the like,
Oh, sorry, sexual intercourse.
yeah.
Yeah. So like, it's too sexualized. The LGBTQ community, like the main argument on the right side is that it's too sexualized, and that's why it shouldn't be in school. Is because you're sexualizing. It's inherently sexual because you're talking about what it means to be gay, to have sex with another man. But I think it takes out the love of what the LGBTQ community is, and so
So I think I have a slight disagreement with your framing here, maybe.
okay.
I think there's another reason to do it than to just like teach kids about sex. I don't think that that's what the point is. I think the point is they don't want these kids to get bullied.
Of
Like when you
Oh.
see a kid that's like, oh, he's hanging out with that other like boy. Look at him, he's gay. Like imagine like how that feels when you're gay. Like that probably
yeah, so
doesn't feel great.
I just had a roller coaster of what I thought you were saying there. So I get what you're saying
Oh.
now. I thought you meant the right is saying don't talk about it so that you don't get bullied.
No.
But you're saying that the left is saying talk about it so that it's more normalized.
Yeah, talk about it so it's more normalized when people see it. I mean, if you believe that transgender education is making more kids trans, that's fine. I think there's probably something else going on. I think it's probably that there's just a lot more like people that were latently trans than we thought, and that
I think it would have to be both.
maybe that's
Like
true.
if you were to try to convince me that 90% or even anywhere above 50% of trans people are trans because now it's more like acceptable, like we didn't know, I would definitely call into question.
Well, I mean,
Because the social contagion has to be like very real. I feel like it's like so supported. There
people
has to be a
really
social contagion.
overestimate the number of trans people that are in these schools as well.
Yeah. There's a huge, and this is what I talk about every time I get into this conversation, is how loud this conversation is versus how real this conversation is. But I don't think that should necessarily stop people from addressing an issue if there is an issue.
Yeah.
What it is saying though is that like some of these numbers aren't necessarily correct.
So if trans education led to more trans people, led to less bullying, if it did both of those things, what would you say?
If trans education led to less trans people,
More trans people and less bullying.
more trans people, and less bullying, fundamentally, I would call into question a few things. One, I think there's the argument that I've heard and that I think I like as a psychology major is that generally when people are having issues, especially when it comes to self-identity, you should do whatever makes them the most content with who they are. And so sometimes the answer is do not become transgender. Sometimes the answer is your uncomfortabilities with yourself is normal. your uncomfortabilities with yourself is, like people overcome this, people do it in this way. Some people are just like, a tomboy, like maybe you're just gay. Like sometimes the answer is no, do not become trans. Sometimes the answer is yes. And so I don't think more transgender people is objectively a good thing.
I don't either.
Yeah, I think like, and then beyond that, something that had been that somebody had talked to me about, and I don't care whether this number is true or not. The fact that there's a number of money to be made by medical associations for each trans person, whatever that number is. I've heard it quoted from anywhere from $70,000 to $1 million per person. Um, like when you get the full surgery, like you're on medication for years, you're getting all the surgeries, all the implants, all that, you can make up to $1 million just from kind of convincing someone to be transgender. I think that applies some weird intent. And if you wanted to get the most money, you would tell schools to teach people about transgenderism. And so there are some weird things to focus. I would say it's definitely not inherently good to have more trans people.
Yeah, I agree.
That's
I mean, I
that's my
think
end goal.
when I talk about trans issues, my general like understanding going into it, and this might be wrong, is that it's a illness, a mental illness called
Body dysmorphia
body dysmorphia. Yeah, gender dysmorphia.
or gender. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so people have gender dysmorphia, and they probably can't all be treated to like the effect that they would be like back to normal or whatever, like they would feel like they're assigned gender. And they also find like different levels of like hormones in their brains are different, like size. Like I think maybe it's like the pineal gland is different size. There's like a lot of weird brain chemistry that goes on in people that have transitioned. And those things feel like they could mean that not everyone is like born the correct gender, maybe. So if you have that science there, do you think that's like something you could teach?
I think you could teach. I think you could teach that science. That was bizarre. Oh. Hello. That was crazy. Anyway, we had some guests. They heard us talking about everything, so they came and wanted to join us.
Yeah.
So you're talking about like science, like would that be something worth teaching?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of science there. I mean, it's a really like new phenomenon that they're studying, but
Yeah, I think it's very different. I'm really trying to filter out the loudness of some of these things. So like the teachers who are like saying like don't tell your parents, like don't come out to your parents about being gay, like just keep that between you and me, and then they kind of foster that relationship. You know what I mean? Like I know that's the vast minority, but it's hard to keep those out. So what I'd say is that if you're going to talk about transgender education, it should be purely scientific, and I think it should be as devoid of bias as you could possibly get, especially when it comes to encouraging people. I think it's a real issue, but I think that because of how political it's gotten, it's caused a lot of people who shouldn't be transitioning to transition, just because of how acceptable, encouraged, and loud the conversation is.
well, what do you mean transition? Because there's people that just go by different pronouns but never do anything,
Yeah, I mean, like going through like the full, like going through any form of surgery.
like hormone therapy and stuff.
Hormone therapy, I'm a little less knowledgeable about, but I'd say something that is by definition completely irreversible. Some people would describe hormone therapy as irreversible, but some other people would also describe puberty as irreversible. So
Wait, is puberty reversible? Oh my God.
yeah, like yeah, no. Some people would say that it's irreversible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that you can't reverse puberty. So like, that was a weird logical thing that someone was like, no, hormone blockers are irreversible, and someone's like, well, puberty is irreversible, and I was like, wow, I've never heard that perspective before. I mean, I guess technically you're right, but in general, I think it's made to be a more applicable issue to the average human than it actually is, and so I would say that's a net negative. In general, I'd say more people have gone through transgender surgery than needed to go through transgender surgery, and I think that's a net negative in general.
No matter how many kids aren't bullied.
No matter how many kids aren't bullied, yeah. I think we're in a pretty accepting society of people when it comes to those issues. And of course, people are going to get bullied for those things, unrelated to where I am or where you are. But I think we're already making strides, and I think that's very unrelated to teaching it in school. I think that's just a societal norm that we're shifting to.
So my theory on this, by the way, is that a lot of the time people say that dysphoria itself isn't the thing that leads to suicide or to bad depression because it's usually paired with something else. A lot of the time they say like dysphoria is like heavily paired with suicidal ideation and depression. And it's like a really, really high percentage of kids that are trans are also depressed. I think if you want to fix that, I think you just have to make sure that people feel welcome to be trans. I went to a summer camp in Maine this summer, and I was a counselor there. The kids that were trans, the people that were out trans, like it was a very, very welcome environment for them. They probably made it a little too welcome, to be honest. Like it's just like it was crazy the amount of like things they did. But ultimately, I think it made it really like good for like the kids that were trans because they weren't like getting bullied, they weren't made fun of. If any of that went down, it was like immediately like we're going to talk about this and like say hey, this isn't okay, and you don't have to do anything other than that. But I think if there's no education about it, that kind of bullying that goes on behind the scenes is just going to get much worse. Like it was really really bad not long ago, like really bad. And if you go back like 50 years or so, like the treatment of trans and homosexual people was so bad. Like it was illegal to be trans and in the military. That's like the craziest thing to me.
Well, yeah, well, that's so. I think what you get into when you talk about this is like what is happening when people are bullied for it. And so, like, I guess if the argument is that teachers are like not doing anything when somebody's bullied, I think that would be inaccurate. I don't think it matters what you're getting bullied for. I think most teachers are calling that out. If you're saying that it's an education thing is why people are bullying other people, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think if somebody is perceived as weird, I don't know what kind of education you could do other than what a teacher would say if they agreed with transgenderism or not. Like a teacher would just be like, hey, some people are different than you. Like you just got to accept the differences of other people. I think a teacher would say that unrelated to why the kid's getting bullied. Do you kind of get what I'm following? Like it seems like the issue of bullying is unrelated to transgenderism in that people are going to get bullied for being different no matter what. You know what I mean? And it's not to say we shouldn't stop bullying, but I think the issue is the bullying, not necessarily the education. I don't think education would be the solution to bullying. I think it would be the approach that of knowing when people are getting bullied, how they're being bullied, and how people are responding to it.
I mean, I kind of just disagree because I think I remember as well as like a lot of kids my age, the like huge initiative to stop bullying of like disabled people. That was like a huge initiative. They had us sign a release in class. We were not allowed to use the R word, which
Yeah.
I agree with. It's probably good that they had us do that.
Yeah.
But I noticed a dramatic decline of that kind of bullying after that initiative took place. I don't know if you experienced something similar.
Was that initiative educational, or was that like, did you guys learn a lot about like, here's how this stuff happens? Like,
We had to watch the bully documentary. I was part of
was
our
it an
class.
anti-bullying documentary, or was it teaching you how mentally disabled people are created and what are the processes that happen in that?
It was an anti-bullying documentary, but it featured a bunch of disabled people. I will say that.
Yeah, and so you could do the same thing with transgenderism, but you don't have to go into like what makes a transgender person transgender. Like if you're transgender, come talk. You know, like that's a separate conversation than don't bully transgender people. You know what I mean? Like
If you're not allowed to teach about transgender people, then you're not allowed to talk about it at all. Like you're not allowed to say, well, don't bully transgender people because they're like this. That doesn't work the same as the like messaging around the disabled people where they were like, hey, here's some like people that have like some disabilities and these are like things that people were doing to make fun of them. This is not okay. Like people are born differently. Like they have like that kind of conversation and that's effective against bullying. Whereas just saying, hey, don't bully, and then transgender people are bullied and it's like there's nothing else there. It's like I feel like that doesn't work as well.
I'm trying to, I guess, conceptualize that distinction between the two. Um,
So something like pronouns, which are kind of elusive sometimes, like people don't go by their assigned pronouns, and that confuses kids.
mhm.
Sometimes kids might just not want to do that. Like they might not want to follow the pronoun rules. And, obviously, like as adults, we're probably like mature enough to just be like, well, it doesn't really bother me. I can just call somebody whatever they want to be called.
Yeah.
But to like a kid, it's like, well, why do I have to call them that? Like, and as soon as the teacher doesn't look their way, they're misgendering and like being kind of rude to the kid. I think that kind of thing does exist, especially when there's zero education to stop it. Like even if a teacher calls it out in the moment, I don't think it just gets rid of it. I think you should probably educate people that these people exist, especially as they become, bigger parts of society.
It seems like the pronouns thing in this whole conversation is so new that it's hard to not correlate the fact that we're having this conversation to why we're seeing these issues in school.
Hmm.
And so you kind of can't put the genie back in the bottle on this, and that like we've had the conversation, so there's no way to undo it. Um, but it does call into question like how many of these kids that are going by different pronouns, if this is such a new phenomenon, like is it a chicken or the egg kind of situation? You know what I mean? Like is this truly something that these kids are feeling, or is this something that's new? And that kind of gets into the social contagion thing. It's where we did not have this issue of pronouns 15 years ago because it wasn't expected that you're using pronouns 15 years ago, no matter what it is. And so now we have like these trans kids at school that need to be respected by their pronouns and all these things. But that is a new thing in itself. Same with even kind of caring about this issue is a new thing.
Hmm.
And so I guess I lost where I was going with like what that exactly means in this conversation. But I think it begins to call it to question the authenticity of kids who are trans, of what that experience actually looks like. Some of the questions that people are commonly asking, like, how do you know who is it for a kid to decide? You know, like at what age are they even like able to cognitively make these decisions and questions like that? I think you begin to ask questions like that, like, is it real? Pretty
I
much,
think
like,
it's
are these kids real?
I think it definitely depends on the like type of person you're dealing with. Like with gay people, I think it's pretty hard to like deny somebody's gay when they like say they were like, yeah, I felt gay since I was like 5 years old. Like
Yeah,
I knew I was gay since I was 5 years old. I don't deny that from somebody, just like I usually don't deny that they like were transgender if they just know it internally. Um, I think people that just feel like gendered queer or maybe like they're uh, some kind of abnormal gender, I don't know, they're non-binary, um, things like that. Maybe those people will be more likely to change over time, but I think those people that feel like very strongly about it, I just let them be their own. I don't know. I just trust them more than I trust my gut.
yeah, and I think that's giving them a lot of leeway, and I would do that. I would do that as well if they were adults. It's where they're like children to where I struggle. Um, and I'd also like to make a very big distinction between um, kind of the more sexual orientations than gender. So like the difference between gay and lesbian to like transgenderism and
Hmm.
all those other things. I think there is an important distinction there. Um, in I guess just the decision making that kind of needs to be taken place, and especially again when it's so new and so fresh and it seems to have been created by a social contagion, and now you have kids saying making these decisions about how they feel, and there are voices around them, generally parents or potentially teachers or other students who are saying like you might be transgenderism. Like how many times, like when I was 9, I was Lightning McQueen after I watched Cars. You know what I mean? Like it's stuff like that where you begin to call into question like the authenticity of what it actually means to say that you're transgender as an elementary student or as a middle schooler. Like, can you even say that? Or do you think that there are other influences kind of pushing you into that direction?
My way of looking at this is I just think it's basically between the kid, the parent, and the doctor to decide. I typically don't like involving the state in something like that because I think the position that most people take sort of like nonchalantly is, oh, well, if we allow people to talk about this in schools, then they're going to get transitioned from the doctor. But the alternative then is we're going to ban them from talking about it in schools and make it impossible for kids to get any kind of gender affirming care because we're worried about doctors having some financial incentive to do it and kids not knowing what they're talking about and parents just being, like way too liberal. And all of these things together, I feel like there's just not enough evidence that that's like a big enough problem to stop the freedom and like the denial of like liberty to like express your gender the way you want to be. I know when I was like 10, I probably like thought like for sure I'm like a straight guy or whatever. And I think from that point on, I've just like followed my life that way. But if I was like convinced I was gay at 10, I think it would feel really like horrible if everyone in my life was like denying me that opportunity to like become who I thought I was. Or like, I guess if I was transgender, like if I knew I was transgender, I think that's something that uh, probably has a downside that we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part because when you're talking about this, it is probably as internal to the person as you could get when you're talking about these things, especially when people are who are gay and you're talking about them as if they're like some statistic. You know what I mean? But I think where you get into this idea of we should leave them alone, the people who are very avidly against this would bring up child endangerment or they'd say like, well, we don't let parents starve their children because it's bad for them, or we don't let them you can't let them get a tattoo at 15 or whatever. And so
I think that the problem is then you get into all these like people that are like parents' rights advocates that are like, well, parents should just be the owners of their children and never allow them to get this affirming care.
yeah,
I think the doctors mainly should be the ones that have like if it's between like the kid and the doctor and they decide like there's some care that needs to be done and the parent like disagrees, there needs to be some process to like resolve that.
yeah, but I think the initial reaction, I guess, from my part is again with that the doctors being incentivized, and so it's like there needs to be
Doctors don't get paid for doing a surgery, right? Like, isn't it
well
usually that they get paid like salaries?
they get not paid for not making the company money. So as in like you might get fired or there might be incentives or incentives that you're not really looking at. Like the company has incentives
Sure.
to add a new policy that requires that you do it under very loose restrictions.
And I'm okay.
Things like that.
I'm okay probably doing some like management of that policy with the government. Like there probably should be like roadblocks in place for that doesn't happen. But I'm not okay just banning the surgery
Yeah,
for children.
I was gonna say right now, I think my general opinion is that it's too loose. And I wouldn't say that we like erase it. I think there is a middle ground. I would lean towards the looser end of like, excuse me. There has to be like statistical averages of people who are genuinely who genuinely have gender dysmorphia and like things that we can base it off in that realm, not just like whether they see it. But I also think that the right really likes to make it seem like it's an easier process than it actually is based on maybe some outlier cases. And so I'm not I don't research this stuff. What my general philosophy is that you're going to face adversity in your life. Things are going to be difficult, and overcoming those generally is going to make you a better person. And so my instant reaction to things that are like quick fixes or like erase all problem in your life, I generally am not a huge fan of those because overcoming struggles is like what life is in general. And I think it makes you stronger and a better person. I don't think that is a one-to-one scale to this conversation,
Mhm.
but I think it's what influences a lot of my instinct when I'm talking about this. Um, and so that's why I would lean generally looser in saying that like or generally stricter than loose, but it definitely is in the middle. I don't think I'm a huge fan of like it should never be it's going to be talked about whether it's in school or not. We can't say nobody can be transgender. We can't say nobody can go through these surgeries. Um, I think generally children shouldn't be going through surgeries which is a different
I agree.
different thing than like, you know, just medication. Some people would disagree, people who are maybe more knowledgeable than me.
I would
But
agree with you. I think surgeries are usually for post-puberty.
yeah, and so but I think those are strict. I think those are outliers, and I think they're made louder than they actually are. But I'm not a statistician, but I think people are looking at this generally in the wrong way, and a lot of emotional connection to it gets in the way of general logic.
Yeah,
What the
I
point is.
have a tough time properly framing this one. Like, I'm not a expert on this specific topic. I've just heard a lot of things that made me like feel really like unsure that people are having a good faith conversation about it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the biggest thing is like want what's best for people, and you'll probably come to an all right solution. But the second you have like an ego to defend, or you have like a reason, and that's why I think the left is more incentivized to defend this than the right is generally, which is why I think I lean more right on this issue. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong. But I think it's important to wager when you're having these conversations.
Yeah.
We have been going for an hour and a half, which was awesome. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off. But Jackson, this was awesome. And are there any last plugging for your club, for you in general, or any last plugging you'd like to do? I'd love to give you an opportunity to say the final words.
I think October 25th, we're having a meeting to talk about foreign affairs. I will have more details on that in my email list. So if you want to sign up for Poli-Sci Club, you can. It's just on the website. Just look for politics for the Iowa State clubs. That's all I got.
Awesome. It was so awesome having you on, Jackson.
Thank you. Yeah,
All
thanks,
right.
Elijah.